Welcome to CS Week Success Stories, second Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern webinar series. These webinars are the top-rated workshops from our attendees from Conference 39, held last May in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Lisa Collins with CS Week, your moderator today, along with Denise Mullendor, your host. We invite you to attend CS Week and Conference 40 to be held April 25th and 29th at the Phoenix Convention Center in Phoenix, Arizona. This program will be recorded and available for playback along with our other archived presentations. You can find them under the Educational Venues Webinars link from our website. Attendees are encouraged to upload questions in the Q&A panel on the lower right of your screen. Be sure to click the All tab to make sure that I will see your question. We will wait until the end of the presentation to answer them. Today's program, Enterprise Performance Management for Field Service Crews, is presented by Rocky King, Senior Engineer, Distribution Management Systems for Georgia Power, a subsidiary of Southern Company. Rocky supports the Mobile Workforce Management System and serves as chair of the core team for Southern Company. He works with business intelligence reporting for customer service and operations and represents distribution on the Georgia Power Business Intelligence Analytics team. His experience includes Supervisor of Dispatch Center, Field Service, and Fleet. Welcome, Rocky.
Thank you. I've already gone through my background here. I just wanted to point out I'm also a member of Utility Analytics Institute Work Management Process Analytics Working Group, which had a project in 2015 to develop a whole list of measures that can be used for work management, enterprise performance management. So I've had a lot of good opportunities to come across some good measures for folks to use for enterprise performance management. I'm with Southern Company. Southern Company is made up of these four southeastern utilities: Alabama Power, Georgia Power, Gulf Power, and Mississippi Power. We serve 4.4 million customers, and we handle about 2.7 million work orders every year. The objectives of this session are to describe tools to improve field worker productivity, describe the challenges of establishing quantifiable metrics, and to describe the use of metrics to improve training. The agenda is this. First off, let's define what enterprise performance management is. I'm going to talk through some examples, 4 different examples that we use for performance management at Georgia Power, and some lessons learned from those measures. We're going to talk about data and reporting, and then I'll summarize it at the end and take your questions. And now, what was the driver for us? Why did we get involved? You're probably going to see the term ARMS a lot. ARMS is what we call our Automated Resource Management System. It's our acronym for the Mobile Workforce Management System that we have. And our team is made up of folks from the support staff from all the operating companies and our IT groups. We're all together on one team, and we develop the things that support our mobile work management system. But 10 years ago, when we were going through our last big iteration with this, all of us had been or were currently supervisors. So we had a very self-motivated interest to be able to collect and report data to help us give those performance reviews, to do those annual reviews and do monthly performance discussions, and to provide daily performance feedback. So we were really looking to develop things that would help us to do what we had to do for our supervisory jobs. So the definition part, what is performance management? Well, it's a process, and the steps are, first, define what's important, and then measure it. If you can't measure it directly, measure those activities that contribute to it. And then act on the results. You got to do something with what you've learned from your measures. So enterprise performance management, when you put it all together, it's enterprise or company-wide tools for local performance management. What does it look like? Well, performance management starts from the executive level, setting a vision for what the company should do. That vision is described in terms of a strategy. What steps are we going to take to implement that vision? The strategy defines the activities and results that it takes to make those, to make the strategy happen. And we track those activities and results by using key performance indicators. So at my company, the key performance indicators are usually presented as a scorecard. Looks like a report card, where what's important is listed on the left and the numbers are on the right. The key performance indicators cascade through the whole company too, from the executive level down to managers and supervisors and down to technicians. Everybody has key performance indicators that relate directly to what it is that they do. So they can see, we hope, they can see how their performance contributes to the company's performance. We tailor it at each cascading level. So performance management is define what's important, measure it, and then act on the results. Define part, the scorecards identify the important actions and the results. The measure is the scores providing feedback on whether the organization is on course. But how do you do the act part? How do you work the act part of it out of the report card or scorecard? So the real question is, what action do you take as a result of the scorecard? For a field service organization, a big part of what's important is really in the hands of the field technicians. They're out there doing the work, they're talking with the customers. So how does the supervisor know what activities and processes need attention? And then how does the supervisor know what to do to get things back on course? So performance management stops at the top, and then what we're doing today is figuring out how to make that gap there all the way down to the technician. How do we help them understand what it is that they're doing and how it contributes to the performance of the entire company? So that's it. We're going to talk about enterprise tools for local performance management. Along the way, we're going to talk through the objectives. We had this at the start, and I've got to hit these points. Describe how companies are using enterprise performance management to improve field worker productivity. It's just going to be my company, one company. But I've got a lot of evidence from other peers that a lot of other folks are using similar measures. Productivity, how do you define productivity? For a field service organization, it's got to be customer satisfaction and efficiency. Those are your main drivers for field service productivity. Second objective is to discuss the challenges of establishing quantifiable metrics. Third objective is to describe how metrics can be used to improve training programs for your crews. I'm also going to hit these 4 points. So these are our markers going through. We're going to talk about business intelligence, we're going to talk about golf, and about food, and we're going to end up with references. So we're going to start with the 4 examples. Here's the first example, customer service commitment. The scorecard goal says we've got to do a certain level on customer satisfaction. It's based on surveys, and results are reported at company and region levels, pretty high up in the company. And then the supervisor's challenge is, how do we determine customer satisfaction at a local level? We don't have data down that low provided from the customer satisfaction surveys themselves. So what is it that we can measure? Well, customers tell us that keeping our commitments is very important to the way that they judge our service. It's one of the top 2. So every service order has a commitment date. We measure the percentage of time that we meet our commitments. We analyze the numbers by all the different ways you can slice and dice things. And some work types have targets for percent commitment met. So here's an example of the display that we give to our supervisors. They can filter this to see their own particular area. They can get a total number of how many were completed, how many were missed, and how many were met. And notice that we don't give a percentage of how many were missed, we give a percentage of how many were met, because we want to help supervisors convey positive information. Talk about the good stuff about what you're doing, and let's strive to improve the numbers and make the numbers go up instead of driving down bad behavior. It's just a different way of looking at things. But folks can see what they're doing in their level or their region or their headquarters, their operating centers, compared to their peers, and then they can drill down within whatever level that is and see what performance contributes to that score. So you can see how many somebody did and what their score was for it. We can also break it down by job code. And what I can see on here is that the job codes or job categories that are most closely related to the customers and the customers are expecting us to be there on time or be there by that day, we're scoring higher on those. And the ones that are more in the maintenance categories, we're scoring less on those because we allow our field folks to make decisions. If I have a choice between two jobs to do, I'm going to do the one that's going to impact the customer the most first. And we do a good job with putting our emphasis on the ones that we've got to get done. All right, and that's what I said earlier, percent met instead of percent missed to provide positive reinforcement. All right, and then we can also drill down to be very specific about things. One of the things that came up with this last year was our reconnect repairs complete orders. Now this is a job code when the customer's making electrical repairs, maybe to their main panel, electrical panel on their house. We disconnect service long enough for them to make repairs, and then we have another order to go back and reconnect the service when they're ready, when they have their inspection, everything's ready to go. So I was just showing an example here. The highlighted fields show that I've got the job code of reconnect repairs complete. I'm looking at the month of December. And then on the top left, I see that we missed 2 commitments. So this is the kind of thing that a supervisor would look at, and he would drill down into the data and try to figure out why did we miss those 2. So when they first got this, they asked us for more details. This is the kind of report that we have that provides more details, so they can take action on the missed customer commitments. So this is just a list of some jobs. This isn't from December last year, it's from April, because I've got a good example I'd like to show you. This shows jobs that were completed after the commitment date. Now, an unintended consequence that we had was, on this report, there's a column here that says tech ID, and it's got a contact name. So supervisors would initially hold the tech that completed the order accountable for the order being late. You can imagine what that did to people wanting to work orders that were given to them that were already past the expiry date. They became poison because they'd get their name associated with it. So what we had to do is go back and teach supervisors how to use the history log to find the root cause of the delay. In fact, the next iteration of this report that you're seeing on the screen now, we're not even going to have the tech ID name on it. We're just going to leave it with the supervisor to encourage them to do a little bit more investigation. So here's an example. This is from April 10th. This was the Atlanta Braves home opener. And I know not everybody on the call is interested in the Atlanta Braves, but our home opener was delayed because we had a big storm that afternoon. What happened here was the customer had gotten their service ready. 12:39, we've got an order placed to reconnect their service. The dispatcher assigned it to a Troubleman 1. The Troubleman referred the order back and said, give it to the tap truck. Well, that was a reasonable thing to do because during the day we have a truck set up specifically just to go reconnect these services. In Metro Atlanta, there's such a volume of it that we have to do that. So at 12:54, right after the order's created, we got instructions to give it to the tap truck. The dispatcher transferred the business unit to dispatch it to the tap truck, but they didn't assign it. They didn't realize it until 3:50. If you look at the next timestamp over there, they didn't realize that until 3:50. The order's been sitting there, nobody working it, and the tap truck shift ends at 4 p.m., and they're gone. So then the dispatcher hurries up and assigns it to a second Troubleman. That's the same time that the thunderstorms hit in Metro Atlanta. They hit around 4 p.m. and it delayed our Braves home opener, and everything was a big mess. Had over 10,000 customers out just in that concentrated area, Metro Atlanta. So now the dispatcher does what dispatchers do. They start shopping and trying to find somebody that can work that order in the midst of getting the lights back on from the thunderstorm. So they give it to a third and a fourth Troubleman to do. The fourth Troubleman is en route to the job, but he's interrupted by a trouble call. So this was a wire down call. He had to go take it because it was a safety issue. Finally gets back to work on the job. It's 3:30 a.m. So the last person that touched the order completed the order after the expiry date of the order, so they missed the commitment. But where was the fault? Who was it, the responsible person for us missing the date, the expiry date on the order, for missing the commitment? And really it was way back upstream in this whole chain back to the dispatcher. So this is why our supervisors, both in our dispatch centers and of the field techs, they're talking together, trying to figure out what did we do, what can we do to improve things. So that's the lesson learned, is teach supervisors how to investigate why we missed a commitment. So was it released to be worked after the commitment date had passed? Was it assigned to a tech who wasn't working or a tech in a different territory? Did the tech just carry it around without working it? Was the tech overloaded with higher priority work? Do we have other factors? So supervisors can learn from the jobs that we miss. Sometimes it's due to an individual or sometimes it's due to a process, but we can learn and improve our performance the next time. All right, start a second example. The second example is about productivity. The scorecard goal is profitability, and it reports results at a company and program levels. The supervisor's challenge is, how do I determine profitability at a local level? I don't have any numbers like that. But we know that efficient use of resources contributes to profitability. We measure how our time is charged and the number of orders that are worked. One of the objectives that we had was to discuss the challenging of establishing quantifiable metrics, and time reporting was definitely a challenge for us. The login and logout timestamps are recorded by the mobile work management system, so that helps, but users are self-reporting their statuses by clicking the status keys. En route, on-site, available and unavailable, all that stuff is self-reported. So how do we know that people are not gaming the system? Well, the status information is sent back to the customer information and outage management system so that we can relay this information to our customers. It's important because we're actually communicating what they're clicking with their status keys back to the customers. It's also important for safety to have status as a backup. We've got GPS location on our trucks. It doesn't always work, so it's a good safety thing to know when somebody's en route to a job or on site at a job. And then the third reason why this is important is status key usage affects our time reporting for productivity. So we really do want folks to be accurate in their use of status keys. So our productivity reporting includes status key usage. So this is the display, the dashboard that we have for looking at productivity. Again, it's possible to drill down on the left to get just the group that you're interested in. I can see several things about this. I've got a summary of numbers up at the top, but then it breaks down by each individual technician. I can see how many orders they worked. I can see how frequently they use their status keys. I can see how many orders per hour that they average, and I can see that their cost per order varies a lot from technician to technician. So now I want to talk about golf in relation to productivity measures. I have played golf or played at golf, but not very well. I actually took a lesson once. It's one of those things where the guy says, I can improve your score or you don't pay. And he saw me on the driving range take a few swings, and he said, you play a lot of softball, don't you? And he walked away. He walked away from the chance for me to pay him. So I must not be too good of a golfer. But I do understand the game and how it's scored. Every time you play golf, you're really going against three standards or three different comparisons. There's the course standard for golf, which is par. You know, most courses have a 72-stroke par for the course. And then there's other golfers that you're playing with in your tournament or your foursome, and you're measuring your score against what they did. But you're also measuring your score against yourself. You're trying to change your handicap, that you've got a pattern of how you scored in the past, and you're trying to continuously improve and make yourself a better golfer. Well, for field service, we really got the three same types of scoring comparisons, and I really take advantage of this when I can for these measures. So there's a work type standard. I can say for a particular job code, I've got a standard of doing a job within so many days or at this cost for doing the job. I can be measured against other field techs and say, how are they doing? My peers, how are they doing? What's their cost per order for working a job compared to my cost per order? And then I'm also measured against my past performance. What have I done in the past, and am I improving? Am I getting better on what I'm doing? I ran across this definition that really describes the essence of performance measurement. A performance measure is a comparison. So comparison means you're comparing one thing to another. It's a comparison that provides objective evidence of the degree to which a performance result is occurring over time. So comparison, it's got to have evidence, tells you how much, and you're looking at it over the course of time. So we put together a lot of our reports, keeping those things in mind. I want to be able to see one thing compared to another thing. I want to see how I'm doing across the scope of time. A lot of times when you see trend information, it's displayed this way. This is a dual axis measure. I see some measures here for a tech, and I can see the green is their cost per order with a scale on the right-hand side, and the gray is how many orders they worked with this scale on the left-hand side. It's just a way to look at several different measures at one time and compare. But there's a lot of space up and down between these, and I have to scroll a lot to see all my folks. It's hard to do a measure between people using a traditional trend line. If I take an example, here's a couple of trend lines, and if I were to imagine this as a card and pick up that top trend line card, pick it up and look at it from the end there where the arrow is. And each one of those monthly points was represented by a dot. The dots that were closest to me would be bigger on the right end of the scale, and the dots that were further away from me would be smaller. But it would be a lot more compressed, so it would look something like this. This is the same information for these same two technicians. So the gray line is under the orders worked. You can see that the technician on the top row had a lower number of orders worked, and you can see the span. That's really what we're interested in trend lines anyway, is what is the span of the value that you're measuring? What's the lowest and what's the highest? And the second thing we want to know is directionality. Are they getting better, are they getting worse, or are they staying about the same, kind of wobbling back and forth between the same numbers? So I can see the first tech worked fewer orders. They've had a couple of good months where they worked more orders, but they had a few bad months too. The second tech has been doing very well, but their recent trend is a little bit downward by looking at that scale. And under the cost per order, I can see that the tech on the top line has been all over the place in terms of their cost per order, but their average is higher than the tech on the second row. So just different ways to do these comparisons between folks and look at time over at the same chart. So when you put all that together for this entire group, this is called a dot plot. So the newest dots are the largest, the oldest dots are the smallest, and the diamonds mark the averages. And it's a quick way for me to see where the outliers are. Who are my folks that are working more orders? Who are the folks that are working less orders? And then the orders per hour and cost per order, you can kind of see from here, they're inverses of one another. So if a person works more orders per hour, their cost per order is going to go down. And you can see the folks that are scoring very well on this and the folks not doing quite so well. So if you're a supervisor, you'd be able to provide better feedback to someone about how they're doing. I'm going to give you the calculations for this in case this is something you'd like to use. So here's how the calculations are done. The logged on time minus the unavailable time equals work time. Unavailable time, they can click a status button on their computer and it'll say I'm at lunch or I'm stocking materials or my supervisor has assigned me to another task that doesn't involve my mobile work management system. They have all kinds of ways that they can say I'm not working orders on my mobile computer system. So we take all the time they're logged on, subtract out the time that they're not working ARMS orders, and that equals their work time. For the status key credit, it's a very simple algorithm. We give them 1 minute en route and 1 minute on site. They got to meet those minimums on both of them. If they meet both those minimums, then they get status key credit. They also get credit if they are close to the last order completed. And there's lots of ways to define close, but I won't go into that. You can figure that one out. And then field created is a lot of times they'll go to a job site and they'll do the task that was assigned to them, but they'll also find something else that needs to be done. A typical example is there's a problem with this meter. I've got to change the meter out. So they field create an order. Well, when they field create that order, we're automatically going to give them status key credit right then because they're not going to spend a minute en route and a minute on site to that particular one. So we're very liberal, very generous in how we give status key credit. If you take the status key credit on jobs and divide it by the number of orders worked, that's the percentage, the status key usage percentage. If you take the number of orders worked, divide it by the work time, that's orders per hour. And then we have loaded cost per hour. Our controllers give us a number that represents a user's cost per hour plus their vacation time and their overheads and their vehicle cost and their supervisor cost. And me in the support group, you know, everybody's costs are dumped on these poor field folks as being their total loaded cost for what they're doing in the field. So we take that cost as their loaded cost per hour. So the work time multiplied by their loaded cost per hour, and then you divide that by the number of orders worked. That's their cost per order. Well, the performance measures help focus on processes and people that need attention. They've still got to be backed up with reports that provide the detail needed to take action. So if you do find somebody that maybe needs some encouragement on their numbers in comparison to other folks in the group, we have other reports that back those up that people can use to drill into the details. So it's easy for a supervisor to see start and end time, for example. They can spend the time that was spent in each one of the statuses. And then we've got order accounting. I think I've got a breakdown on this. Yeah, we can see how much time they spend in each status on the job. Are they spending too much time in unavailable time or not enough time? They're not giving themselves credit for taking their lunch times off. So that time is actually being counted against them. Or available time is the time when they're not en route and they're not on site and not unavailable. It's the time between jobs. Are they doing a good job of managing their available time between jobs? We also have order accounting. So we see how many jobs that a person had when they signed on and how many jobs were added during the day. And then all the different ways that orders can leave the truck. Removed, referred, completed. If they leave a job but it's due in the future, that's probably okay. But if they leave a job on the truck that was due today or it's past due, that's not a good thing. So the supervisor can investigate, why did we leave work that was due on the truck? And if we have to get into even more detail than that, we can produce a daily time report that shows every timestamp for everything that they did throughout the day. And go back and recreate, this is your life, Mr. Jones, if it's necessary. So some things that have come out of productivity, a couple of examples that supervisors have given to me. A supervisor had two techs. They both had the same job and they both had comparable work areas. Not the same work area, but they were comparable in terms of urban to rural and size in what they were doing. But tech 1 was getting twice as many jobs done as tech number 2. His cost per order, of course, was about half of what tech number 2 was. So they asked us for additional information to figure out what's going on, why are these so different? We plotted the route that Tech 1 did for several days, and we looked at, he had a pattern that was generally kind of oval. He did a good job of leaving the headquarters and working jobs that were close to each other and making a path and working his way back to the headquarters at the end of the day. Tech 2's route for the day looked like a star pattern. Anytime you see a star pattern, you know you got a problem because it's appeared that the tech liked windshield time better than bucket time. It was almost like he deliberately picked the job that was further away from where he was as his next job and spent more time driving. So more time driving, less time working orders, that was the difference in productivity. So there was a little bit of encouragement session that happened after we found this information. There was another case where a supervisor investigated a productivity decline. A supervisor had a meter service rep recommended to him, said, this guy does a great job, you'll really appreciate what he does. Well, the guy comes to work in the area and his productivity numbers are not looking real good. And when he started digging into it and seeing how he was using his time, he saw that after every job was completed, there was a period of time after the job that was just open. He wasn't en route, wasn't on site at the job, wasn't really doing anything that he could tell on the job. So the supervisor's wondering, you know, is this guy smoking a pack of cigarettes between each job, or what's going on? Why do we have so much time between the jobs? So the supervisor, you know, went out and rode with him and said, you know, let's see what you're doing. Well, it turns out in the area where the guy was, he knew this place like the back of his hand. He knew how to get from one place to another. He didn't need maps. You could give him an address and he could probably tell you the meter number. He just knew it that well. This guy had moved to a new area, and he had never learned to use the tools that are built into our mobile work management system that help you with the mapping piece. So he didn't know that he could click on an order and click a button and it would draw him a line showing how to get to the next job and give him turn-by-turn directions. He just didn't know it and didn't know how to use it. So he was trying to use, you know, paper maps of the area and figure this out and looking at all the jobs he had left and trying to figure out which of these jobs is the next one closest to me. He just wasn't taking advantage of the tools that he had. So once the supervisor figured that out, you know, he was able to give him some training, get him back on track, and his productivity really improved. He was able to take advantage of the tools that he had to do a better job in his work. So that brings up the second objective that we had, describe use of metrics to improve training. Our supervisors have asked us to provide one-pagers, keep it very simple. And the one-pagers aid just-in-time training by supervisors. They'll give us a topic and we'll put just the minimum that you need to know on that topic on one page. And that lets the supervisor go out there and do a tailgate with that employee, spend a short amount of time, go through that process and fix that one thing. That has been our most effective way of getting training out in the field when folks need it. Also, in my group, the group that I work with in distribution management systems, we have a person that's really dedicated to being our field presence out there. He helps with training needs. He figures out if there's process issues. He's the first one to tell us if we've got a problem with our application that we need to fix. So, you know, the light version is we prepare something and the supervisor takes care of it. And the other end is we got somebody in our group that goes out there and meets with these folks and learns and tries to make our application better and fix problems ahead of time. So it's a whole continuum in between about how that happens, but those are the two extremes for how we get involved with helping to provide the training needed to improve performance. All right, third example, on-site time per job code. The scorecard goal was what profitability, again, the results are reported at company and program level. The supervisor's challenge is how do I apply that at the local level? We know that the efficient use of resources contributes to profitability, so we measure the on-site time for each job code. How much time are they spending doing this job? So this is an example of one of the dashboards that we have. It's called Job Time Statistics, and we can pick any job code, look at any different level, and we can see all the people in that group and how much time they're spending doing that particular job code. So, you know, it's kind of significant. One guy averages 4 minutes for doing a connect order, and the other guy does 10 minutes for doing a connect order. What's the difference between those two? Is there a process problem for those? I like the histogram too, so you can see that not all these are done in the same amount of time. They cover a wide span, but it's the average that we're looking at when we're comparing between people. So here's some examples of things that we've learned by looking at the job time statistics. A supervisor had 8 technicians that were right near the average. Their numbers were all clustered. But then there were 3 that were way over, almost twice as much on-site time as the other 8. So the supervisor goes to investigate. And what he figured out is that one of those 3 had trained the other 2. And they didn't have a real good process for doing work once they got to the job site. You know, the efficient way to do meter work is to get yourself a big 5-gallon bucket and put all your tools in it and walk to the meter socket and do all your work without having to walk back and forth to the truck. Well, these guys must have been trying to get their steps in on their Garmin or their Fitbit because they were just making trips back and forth to the truck, and that was taking up all the time that they had. So A good catch by using job time statistics, and we've seen improvement since. Second example, we had a project where we had to go change out a bunch of meters. They were our first generation AMI meters in the field. And everybody was getting about the same numbers on doing their on-site time for these meter change orders, except for one person who was way under average. So you had to investigate, why is this guy doing so much better? Is he just that much faster, or is he taking all the steps that he needs to take? So the supervisor met with him and provided some performance feedback about using your status keys correctly. Make sure you notify your customers. Don't just snatch the meter out and go. You got to tell the customers what's going on. And then, are you performing the proper safety checks before and after you're doing your work? So we expect that a job is going to take a certain amount of time, and being under that time is as bad as being over. All right, and then this was a story on me. I was looking at the job time statistics with a supervisor, and I noticed one guy was way over his average on the orders. And I, said something that I probably shouldn't have. I said, this guy probably needs to find a different career because he's just obviously not cutting it. And the supervisor told me, that's my best guy. You're picking on the wrong man. What I didn't know was this guy's working in the downtown Atlanta territory. When he clicked the on-site button on his computer mounted in his truck, sometimes he was 3 or 4 blocks from the premise and he had to walk there to it. A lot of the meters here in downtown Atlanta, they're in basements or they're in meter rooms where you have access problems, and you might have to make arrangements. You might have to call the customer and wait on somebody to meet you there on site to do the work that you have to do. So the lesson learned is that supervisors have the knowledge to put performance numbers in context. It could be as simple as rural versus urban, but the supervisor can read these numbers and understand what they mean. Performance management is best handled locally, and I should stay out of it. The fourth example I have is on rework, and it really affects both customer satisfaction and profitability. The supervisor's challenge was determining customer satisfaction and profitability at a local level. Rework is doing something more than once. Anytime you have to do the same thing more than once when handling a service request, it's rework. It costs you time and money to do it again. So we measure the percentage of time that orders require rework. For Georgia Power, rework is 2 categories. The first is referred. That's when you assign a job to somebody and he says, this can be done, but it's not my territory, or maybe I don't have the skills to do it. Maybe it requires a bucket truck to do it and I don't have a bucket, or it requires a digging crew and all I have is a shovel. I'm not going to do this, 80-foot trench. So that would be a good reason for referral. Incompleted is when the customer has to do something first. It actually tags the account, so if we don't contact the customer or can't reach the customer and they call us, it tags the account and says what the customer has to do. So 2 ways we can document rework. So we just have some calculations here that we keep up with the number of orders that were completed, the number that were incompleted, and the number that were referred. And the ratios give us our incompleted and referred to completed ratios, percent incomplete and percent referred. So this is the way it stacks up in the dashboard. If you're looking at a technician level, I can see within my work group that I've got some folks that are never in completing orders. I've got some folks that are at 3%. Referred, has got a range of 0 to 4%. I really can tell when I've got a problem when I've got somebody that's referring orders at a rate of 20%. I've seen examples like that. And what we've learned about rework is to reduce rework, fix communications. It probably wasn't the tech. It was probably the supervisor didn't tell the dispatcher where the boundary line is as to who should get what, or what skills are required to work this particular job code. If we talk better and understand better what's going on with our business, then we can avoid a lot of the rework. So those are the 4 examples I wanted to share with you, enterprise performance reports. The customer commitment was, did we complete it on time? The productivity was the number of orders worked. The status key usage, the orders per hour, and the cost per order. The on-site time was the wrench time, and the rework was multiple touches. Now, I want to talk about data and compare it to food. It's always growing. If you're involved with keeping up with the data for field service, you know, you're always getting more and more data that you have to keep up with. And the data is not in good shape. Sometimes you got to clean it and prepare it and make it where people could use it. You know, so you have to take the raw product and turn it into something that people can use, and that takes time and some effort to get it done. When we first started doing these kind of reports, what you're seeing on the screen now is really a portal type view that we had. And people could put in their query at the top and hit submit, and they'd get back a table of results. And we were expecting supervisors to take that tabular information and do something with it. Well, this was the lesson learned, really the dose of reality. The world has data producers and it's got data consumers. And supervisors are not data producers, they're consumers. They had no interest in producing reports. The idea of taking something from that portal, exporting it to Excel, running a pivot table on it, they're not going to do that. It's just not going to be done. So we had a lot of good information, but it wasn't being used. And it's no good. You can't do the ACT part of define, measure, act if it's not being used. So what did we do about it? We listened to them. We listened to the data consumers. We figured out what their questions were. We pulled this data from a variety of sources to answer their questions. Some of those have been pretty big challenges trying to figure out how to do that. And then we would deliver the reports to fit their needs. So we give them a menu. We got a reports website that's just like a menu. So they can go into their job title, their work category, and they can see a list of reports in different categories as to what they can do. They can choose performance reports. If they need real-time status reports, they can choose that. We made it real easy for them to find the reports that apply to what they do. Instead of having to look through a list of 50 or 60 reports, these are the ones that should be of concern to them in their role in the company. And in the reports themselves is we are all the time tweaking these, trying to simplify them, provide more information, make it easier for folks to read, to give them the answers that they need to run the business. And especially make it easier to spot outliers and figure out who it is, you know, what process or what person do I need to concentrate on to improve my performance. One of the things that we were surprised about is folks didn't even want to go to a website to grab some information. They want it delivered to them. So we've got several reports that are set up for delivery. They're subscription reports, just like having pizza delivered to your house, right? Every day at a certain time, a report comes listing the stuff that you need to pay attention to. And this is probably the most popular thing that we're doing. Folks are using this every day to help run the business. And then for the stuff that is things that you look at on a monthly basis, we really consolidated some reports and put everything in one place so that they didn't have to hit multiple reports. We made it so they could just go to this one page, and at least this gets them started on looking at the information that's important to them. So this one page combines 6 different reports all in one place. Now to me, this isn't sufficient. You don't get the background information that you need just looking at this, but you do have a way to look and see. On the left-hand side, it's got my numbers for my entire group, and if you've got percentages, you can see averages, you know, for the entire group. And on the right-hand side, I can see each individual technician and see what their scores are for these. So this really is a way to do a comparison between your technicians. The second tab on here is a reference, though, and what that does is it makes it easy for them to drill down into each of those other 6 reports and get that detailed information, to see the trend across time, to drill into the information about what caused this number to be like it is. In terms of the training, each one of these also has a link to a one-pager. Like I described before, a quick, easy training material. If you've got somebody that's got a problem, the supervisor can go here, copy this information, you know, print it out, go do the tailgate with the person, encourage them to do better next time. So we're getting near the end. Let me review the objectives and just make sure I've hit all the points. Objective number 1 was to describe how companies are using enterprise performance management to improve field worker productivity. We want to be a part of that chain for what performance management is. Define what's important, measure it, and then act on the results. We want to give people the data that they need to act on the results and improve performance. Then measure productivity, especially for field service work. It's important to figure out, what is this person doing? What is it costing for them to do what it is that they do? Design your reports to answer questions. Figure out what the questions are first, but then design your reports to answer those questions so that it'll be something that people want to use. Design positively. Be in the business of encouraging people to improve their performance, give positive feedback. Design it for the consumers. Make it easy for them to use and get the data that they need. And then help. You gotta help them by being out there in the field, by providing the resources that they need to take what it is that they see and apply it to managing the performance of their work group. Number 2 was discuss the challenges of establishing quantifiable metrics. Well, the first one is listen to what the users want. There's no use having a metric that nobody wants to use, so that's just a waste of time. Listen to what they really want. Measure performance over time. Just a snapshot is not good enough in itself. You really need to look at trends. Some things you can't measure directly, so you can only measure the activities that contribute to it, but that can be very vital information, so take advantage of that. Monitor self-reported data. If you're going to count on information that people can enter themselves, you've got to have some kind of a check system to make sure they're not gaming the system. And then watch out for unintended consequences. If you give some folks a measure, they're going to figure out a way to get it done. It's just human nature. I'm going to score whatever the level is. So just watch out for that and design your system so that you don't provide incentive for people to take advantage of the system. And then where it's necessary, you got to combine data from different systems to answer questions. If you're pretty heavy into business intelligence, you've heard the term semantic layer, and that's one of the things we've had to do is we've had to come up with different spreadsheets that really translators between different databases so that we can combine the data together and answer questions. The third objective was describe how metrics can be used to improve training programs for your crews. And I would say match up your training with what it is that you're measuring. Focus your training where it's needed. Keep it simple. Anything more than a page, you're going to lose people's attention. Just keep it simple and short. We're starting to get into the business of doing, YouTube-type videos to keep people's attention too, but it's got to be very short. And then the third thing is get out there. We just can't all the time be here in our office and figure out what it is that folks need in terms of training in the field. It's that field presence that makes a difference in having productivity measures in a system, an enterprise performance management system that really works and helps the supervisors do what they've got to do. So the 6-word summary of all this is enterprise tools enhance local performance management. Here's my references that I talked about, a few books here that have been very helpful to me as we've worked on doing these. I also mentioned the Utility Analytics Institute. The Work Management Process and Analytics Working Group has a final deliverable, a document that has 30 to 40 measures. They cover short cycle, long cycle work, very long cycle work, planning. There's a lot of good information there. If you're interested, you've got to be a member. You got to join the Work Management Process Analytics Working Group, but there's some information here on how you can do that if that's something that would be useful to you. So Utility Analytics Institute is where that comes from. And now we've got 10 minutes left. It's time for questions and ideas.
That sounds good. Thank you, Rocky. It was a great presentation. We have had a couple of questions that started rolling in, so I'll go ahead and get started with those and just encourage the attendees to please upload your questions to the all panelists so that I may see the additional questions coming through. The first question we have is, how many performance reports do you have and why?
We have about a dozen performance reports for field techs. We've got 4 for engineers. In the back office piece, they've got 6 reports. And that sounds like a lot, but we tried to combine it. We've got these consolidated reports that each type of supervisor can use just one report if they choose to, or they can drill down into the other reports to see the other information. I got to say that every report that we have was requested by our users. Our users have roundtables, which are regular meetings between peers like engineering supervisors or line supervisors. They all meet together from time to time. They collaborate on all kinds of issues, and they often need data to understand those issues. So they come to us, to my group, for help. Every report that we do starts out as an ad hoc report. We're just going to do it once. But then if they get circulated and other people say this is useful information, or they want to see how this trends over the course of time, it may make our list for being a monthly report or even a daily report if that's something that's helpful. But then we find over time, too, that some reports are not needed anymore, so they become extinct and we take them off the list. We're just trying to provide the reports that our users are asking us for.
Okay, well then, so this leads into a follow-up question that is asking, typically how long does it take for you to run a performance report?
Well, the best ones are the ones that are automatic. We've got monthly and weekly reports that are just done automatically off the database systems, and those are great. A lot of times the monthly reports, though, they are combining data from different sources, and they require some steps or some cleanup. You know, there's a lot of work required to managing data. You have to extract it, you have to clean it, you have to enrich it, provide more data than originally came in, and you have to combine it to provide useful measures. So that's what I was really talking about in that food analogy, that there's a lot of preparation involved. So we've got between 50 and 60 reports right now, and it takes us, the folks on my team that are working on this, together we spend about 15 hours each month producing these reports.
Okay, so I think maybe you just already answered this question that just came in. It was asking who manages the tweaking of the reports. Do you have someone in business area like a project program manager, or does IT support you with this effort?
No, we're doing that within distribution management systems. IT helps us a lot in providing the structure, but we're actually the ones that are doing the data cleanup and manipulating the data to produce the reports.
Okay, that sounds good. So going back to earlier in your presentation, this question is asking in regards to bringing the supervisors along to be willing and able to use those reports. Do you have some comments towards that question?
Right. Sometimes it is a challenge to get supervisors to be willing and able to use performance reports and use Tableau. We've got a real good performance management process at Georgia Power. You know, supervisors get training and they're really encouraged to provide regular, positive, and constructive feedback to employees. And they conceptually support the idea of using evidence to make decisions, but they're not always comfortable looking with charts and tables and graphs and explaining the results to others, especially that part about I've got to go talk to one of my employees and explain what's in this graph to them, and they might ask me a question that I don't know how to answer it. So here's how we address that, is we try to give them what they want. You know, if a supervisor asks us for something and we give them that, that's something they're more likely to be willing to share and tell other people about. So that's probably the main thing. We listen to the input from the roundtables that ask for reports. If they want the results as a table, we give them a table. You know, that's easy for folks to look at and to explain. But there's so much value you can get out of visualization about seeing where outliers are. So in addition to the table, we may also have a bar chart or a dot plot to try to transition them over time to a more visual presentation. And we're having some success with that. The second thing is that we schedule web sessions for groups and, you know, even individuals. I had one today. When they ask for help, we get them comfortable with the mechanics of using it. A lot of the stuff that you saw us doing was in Tableau. And there's about 10 things you have to know how to do in Tableau, and once you do that, you can slice and dice just like anybody in the world. It's real easy to use, but we've got to give them that background. So we provide that training on just the mechanics of using the system. And
okay.
Probably more. I got one more. There's more than anything else. What helps us in getting the supervisors engaged is if their manager asks them a question about a report. If the manager knows the answer, that's even better, because the manager can use the report and show them what the answer is, and the manager can help bring them along and say that this is important, this is how you do it. And over time, that supervisor will understand what's important, will answer that question in the future. They'll ask their own questions, and especially if the manager can relate what's in that report to the key KPIs, the scorecards that we talked about at the beginning. Every monthly meeting we have, every one of our offices is going through those KPIs, and if we can relate what the field performance measures are that these folks are looking at to those KPIs, that really is a winner for us. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, that sounds good. Oh, that sounds good. I was just going to let you know, looking at the questions, it looks like we have time for one more, and this one seems like it's kind of longer. It says, do you have single craft crews, or are they more versatile? And if single craft, do you have measurements or reporting for each craft? For example, operator digger, service and meter tech, lineman, etc.
We have a lot of different skills that folks have, and the measures are built so that the supervisor can identify those skills that relate to a certain worker. Like a meter service rep doesn't repair lights. So our report may have a line on it for repairing lights, and it would just be blank for that certain person. It just makes it easier for us to produce the reports instead of having to do all the separate reports. I understand where you're going with that, though. It would be possible for us to produce very tailored reports for each one of these. It's just a matter of, do you have the time to devote to doing that?
Okay, sounds very good. Well, we're getting very close to the top of the hour, so I do want to be respectful of your time and the attendees as well. And I just wanted to let the attendees know that if your question wasn't answered, or if I missed the question, or if you think of something later after the presentation has ended, please email our office. Denise Mullendor will field that question over to Rocky, and we'll get the answers that you're looking for. And I wanted just to do a little quick note to remind the attendees that conference is generally about 11 weeks away. Online registration is open, and you can save $200 if you register this month. And you can do this by visiting our website, csweek.org, for more information. And at this time, Rocky, I'd just like to turn it over to you for a moment to see if there's any parting comments that you'd like to share with the attendees before we conclude the webinar.
I'd just like to say thank you for everyone that attended. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. Please, I'd like to hear from you. If you have something to share about some ideas that you have, there's nothing like collaboration for us to learn from each other. So thank you for participating, and talk to me.
And thank you, Rocky, and all the attendees for joining us today. And this will conclude our webinar.